decisions.
I can do the jab while I'm not presenting.
All we need is,
I can do the Jabber one, probably. But note taker is important too.
Just don't let the queue behind the microphone get too long, Jim.
that's right.
I know, it's going to be rough to do that.
It does make me wonder if this working group should ever meet in person again. It may be that we don't need to, that the mailing list is sufficient. You know.
Yeah.
Once in a while. I know, we cannot get the snapper on.
Yeah, we can't. We could always, we could just say we'll meet in the ISG room or something like that. Okay, we're now up to 5 people plus a chair in the room. That's really exciting.
But the amount of productive work we do, though, I have to say.
And it's time to start.
Yeah, let's get started because I have a plane to catch too. So, good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to the ultimate session of IETF 105. And can I figure out how to change the slide even with the keyboard? No. Hello.
Is it PDF?
Yeah.
You make it full screen and then you can use
The left and right
I'm-
button should do it.
Yeah, I made it full screen.
Now you should be able to use click.
Whoops, it just changed a bunch of times. What's going on? This is very strange. Because that's about 5 slides back.
Does this work? Yeah, this doesn't do anything.
Okay, try it again.
Oh, well, at least we got the note well.
It works now. You did it?
Okay, well,
That's fine.
we'll do it this way. Wow, more people, yay.
Oh, you increase the group participation 20%.
Okay, so presumably by this point in IETF, everyone has seen the note well. And so what we're going to do is, good heavens, wow, that thing is slow. Kind of go through document status and stuff like that, and then each of the active working group drafts, we have a presentation on each of those. So congratulations to everybody that was involved in JMAP Core. So it is now RFC 8620, JMAP
That
mail.
was the weakest applause I've ever heard.
Whoa, sorry, we got distracted. Let's do it again. Congratulations.
Yeah, you're still messing around with the other one.
Arguably, I'm fixing stuff in it. So, yeah, so the other one is imminent. Basically, we are waiting for RFC editor to post new. Oh, okay. Oh, okay, fine. Okay, I'll do that then.
I just wanted to say, this is Neil Jenkins. We do have our first errata for JMAP core as well. There was a minor issue in the JSON in one of the examples.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. You know, if there is no errata, nobody is bothering to redo implement. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yes, you might be able to start on the BIS document right away.
And we've already got an errata item, right?
Yeah, that's what
I'm sorry. I'm distracted by all of the cool new toys and red buttons up here. So sorry. Okay. So JMAP mail real soon now. And we're going to talk about calendars, WebSocket, SMIME, and MDN drafts that are currently there. So let's start with WebSocket, and let me see if I can figure out how to get this thing out of full screen so I can check. It's MDN. WebSocket. Yeah, here we go.
Okay, WebSocket, I think this is getting pretty close to being fully baked. Version 03 I published earlier this week. Most people probably saw 02. It was one small change, which I'll get into as we move along here.
Oh, really? It works that way?
Okay, so here's the list of changes since the last IETF. Real quickly, so I renamed one of the capabilities. That's mostly just for cosmetic purposes. Originally I had set up the push capability to be a query parameter on the URL. That has been changed to its own separate true-false capability. We added a @type argument to the request object, which means that all the objects going to and from the server all have a type so that the client and server knows what it's receiving quite quickly. And we also added a push state argument to the state change object. I'll get into that in another slide. And finally, we added two new objects, a WebSocket push enable and disable. Disable is what was added in 03. The enable was in 02. Next slide, please. Okay, so for notifications discovery, there is the new capability, supports WebSocket push. Put it in bold so everybody knows what we're talking about. Very, very simple true-false property. I don't think there's any reason to argue or discuss that. Next slide, please. So enabling push notifications, here is the new object. Very simple, it has the type. You list the data types that you want to receive from the server in an array. And the last argument is the last overall state that you received from a push notification from the server. So where this is useful is if you're reconnecting to a server, you can give it this state, and presumably the server would then push all updates from this state up to the current state. So it's a quick way for the client to refresh his cache and get up to date. Next slide, please. Here's the notification format, which is identical to the state change object documented in core with the new push state property at the end. If the server can support an overall state, it would include this on all the notifications so that the client knows exactly where everything is at. The next slide, please. And finally, very, very simple object to disable notifications if the client, for some reason, no longer wishes to receive them. That's pretty much it in this draft. Anybody have any questions or comments or outstanding issues with this?
It's Neil Jenkins. So yes, I've reviewed this. I think this looks fine and ready to publish. Just one quick comment on that push state thing. It's basically analogous to the last event ID thing that's already built into server sent events, event source, which is the way you connect the push without WebSocket. So it's just giving you the same functionality over the WebSockets as you can get over
correct.
the core.
Yep, thank you. So personally, I think this is ready for a working group last call. Do we put that out to the list, Jim? How does that work?
I don't know. I'll have to. I don't have a lot of context, so let's ask Ron. But I think probably just send it out to the list.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
That's
just
all I
sending
have.
a working group last call to the list is the way to go, I'd say, with this one.
Okay, great. Just point of interest, this actually, other than the push stuff, has been implemented on the server side at Fastmail in the Cyrus server. And hopefully we will start to have a client side, at least for testing purposes, fairly soon. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item is calendars. And that will be Neil. And I'll try and keep your slides centered. It's a manual process today.
That's better. Cool. Okay, so I published an initial 0.0 draft for this a while back. That was pretty basic. There's still quite a few things to add. So I'm going to give a quick overview of what this is trying to achieve, what the general data model is, and then talk about some of the open issues and see if we've got any people in the room or on the Meet Echo that want to put forward some opinions on those issues. So if we go to the next slide, please. So JS Calendar is giving a way to access calendar data over JMAP. So it's kind of an equivalent to CalDAV, much like JMAP Mail is an equivalent to IMAP, but like in that equivalence, more efficient, easier to use, more consistent. There's a single setup point and you get access to all of the different bits of data without having to set up separately your email, your calendar, and eventually we'll do JMAP contacts as well. This is just calendars. We're not trying to do tasks or journal entries, which you can do with CalDAV, but is rarely actually part of the same system in practice. So doesn't actually, I think, make sense necessarily to be in the same document. You can always add that as a separate JMAP extension with its own capability later. And just like with the mail spec, we want to be able to provide access to the same data via both CalDAV and JMAP calendars and have it be a consistent view so that you can use both clients at the same time and there's an upgrade path, because nothing is going to be able to cut over overnight. So yes, we don't want to radically change the data model, so that's not possible. We're going to use JS Calendar for the event data model. This is in last call over in CalExt. It's JSON representation of calendar data that's much nicer to work with. It's, again, hopefully an eventual successor to iCalendar. If you've not seen that, go have a look at the CalExt stuff if you're interested. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So just quick overview of the general data model. So an account here is a JMAP account, which is kind of a consistency model. It's saying within an account you have properties that must be enforced, like unique IDs within that account and being able to do certain things as transactions within an account, whereas there isn't that requirement across accounts. So you have an account that represents calendar users. So in a shared system, you might have an awful lot of these. This could be an individual, it could be a resource, it could be a location, a room, anything schedulable. You'll be able to query this with standard JMAP methods so that you can, for example, query for search for a room if you have permission to see that. And then from there, the calendar user object gives you an account ID where you can fetch the calendar and the events to see or query the availability on that resource. So yes, so if you have a simple server, it can just support a single user. It doesn't have to worry about the calendar user stuff or anything. You just get the calendar and calendar events data. But for anything that's doing more sophisticated shared user calendaring, you'll have this kind of top level directory of calendar entities, which then reference the different accounts for the actual calendar data for that entity. That's the general overview. Does anyone have any comments or stuff they want to say on that? I think this maps fairly cleanly to CalDAV. If you have any experience with that, the calendar uses are different principles. Is that right, Ken? And then, yeah, the calendar data would be within CalDAV.
I have a question. How are shared calendars handled?
How are shared calendars? What? Sorry, I missed.
How are they handled? These appear to be,
so
users use disjoint calendars, which is...
Yes. So an account is is kind of a data consistency thing. Like you can only have a calendar event with a particular UID can only exist once within an account, but it may exist in different accounts. So in this example, maybe the account on the left is my calendar data and the one on the right corresponds to Ken's. He could share access to his data to me, so I could see both accounts, and I can, but the sharing permissions are done on a per calendar basis. So he could share one of those calendars, but not the other one, for example. Or he could share one read only and one just read free busy. So I can see when he's busy, but I can't see all his information. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank
Cool.
you.
Okay, so I'm just getting into some of the open issues here. See if there's any opinions in the room. So with standard JMAP methods, you have calendar event is a data type which represents an event, and you'll be able to get it via ID, and normally you can fetch changes, which tells you the IDs of objects that have been created, updated, or destroyed since your current state in the client. We're going to want, so for sophisticated calendar clients will be able to get an event that has a recurrence rule and recurrence exceptions and just expand that itself in the client to know when it's actually the occurrences are. But I think that we want a option when you query the events to ask the server to do the expansion for you, which will allow very simple kind of, probably not whole clients, but people that just want to integrate with calendar data to be able to not worry about some of the more complicated bits and still get the data they need. So the question I have is whether we want to also have some kind of mode that lets you get the changes whilst having the expanded events. So the trouble is there could be infinite expanded events. So there could be an infinite number of changes if you change your recurring event and you're fetching the expanded ones. So the only way I could think of this working was if you had some requirement that the IDs of of occurrences are, the prefix of that ID is the same as the ID of the master event, which would then come through in your /changes. But that seems pretty expensive to process, as you have to not just do a lookup, but scan everything for prefix matches. And it also breaks the idea that IDs have no semantic meaning to the client. So I think my inclination is just to say, if you're asking the server to expand events, you don't get delta changes. You still know that something's changed, but at that point, you just have to invalidate your entire cache and ask again. This is probably only going to be simple clients anyway, so I don't think we too much data. Someone stepped up. Yeah, Mike.
Has a form of expanded.
Here we go. Mike, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Oh, I was going to say CalDAV has a form of expanded query, but it's pretty useless actually. It assumes that the client could do almost nothing, and for some reason turned everything into UTC and things. The expanded query I would have liked to have seen is one that treated the instances essentially as a separate event. You know, a fully populated event that looked much like the master event, but with the appropriate time and date in it. But my recollection is we put that in assuming that we would have some really simple client at the other end that could do almost nothing. And in that case, I don't think we need to worry too much about this infinite changes thing. I mean, delivering the events is probably enough.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. I agree. And something in terms of the options I plan to add is, yes, you can ask the server to expand events, and if you do ask it, you can actually also ask it to change it to UTC if you don't want to deal with time zones as well. But that's optional, so you can get them with the time zones but expanded if that's what you want, which I think is what you're asking. Ken?
Ken Murchison, I agree with Mike. I don't see the value in having expansion done in changes. It seems like it might be more apropos to the query method. You know, show me the expanded results within a certain time period kind of thing seems more useful than having it expand a recurrence rule just because I changed the title in a never-ending event.
Yeah, so I think I think there seems to be kind of consensus here that we don't need, if you're doing expansion on the server, you don't get the exact changes, whereas if you're not, it's trivial to do the actual changes like we normally do in JMAP. The way it'll work, yes, with expansion is you'll do a calendar event query and say expand this, and the IDs you'll get back will be IDs for the expanded events rather than for the master event, and you'll get multiple ones. You have to time range the query if you're doing expansion. You can't obviously ask for everything because they could be infinite, and then you just ask for those IDs with a standard get, and the server will return you, like Mike said, the full event as though it were that instance of it with the right date and everything.
Yeah, that was my thinking. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I think happy with that. Let's move on to the next one. What was this? Oh, yeah. Okay. So the calendar event object is representing an event. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is basically a JS event object, which is data format that's in last call and almost finished. But there's a few extra properties that are specific to JMAP on it. It's ID, which is its ID within JMAP, calendar ID, the ID of the calendar it belongs to, and possibly will let you request UTC start, which is what we mentioned before. The server would calculate what the UTC start is given current time zone information. Obviously, we don't store it as UTC in the server because time zones can and do change at any point. But if the client wants to request it, they can ask for what it is given current information. We're not expecting the server to mark it as changed if time zone information changes or anything like that, though. This is going to be clearly marked computed property. So given that we have these extra properties to add, but JS calendar can be extended with arbitrary extra properties, we have a kind of namespacing issue because they're all in the same namespace. So I can see two options here, and I think what's been suggested to me is the best thing is JS calendar will have a registry of property names, and we'll just reserve any ones that we want to use within JMAP so that they're not used in JS calendar. And so if you see those, they're JMAP. Anything else is JS calendar and just gets written straight through to the object. The other alternative I see is we define exactly which ones we expect to be JS calendar, and you have to prefix custom : or something to access the others. But as soon as I heard of the registry idea, I was like, oh yeah, that's probably a much better way of doing it. So that's what I plan to do. If anyone got any comments on that, I see general nodding in the room for the registry. Yeah, okay. I think that's straightforward then. So if we can move on to the next issue. Okay. So this is just a kind of a query of, should we allow an event within an account to belong to multiple calendars in that account? So this is kind of treating the calendars more like labels than folders, if you like. So a bit analogous to how you can do that with mail, potentially, if you want to with JMAP, which is a bit more flexible and powerful. And I was kind of thinking that I liked the idea of the symmetry, but I think overall, I don't think this is a good idea. If we scroll down, there's a few more cons here. One of the main problems is calendar, it belongs to us various properties like what are the default alerts for this calendar? It's quite common to have different ones for different calendars. What's the time zone for this calendar potentially, and ACLs. And so if an event is in multiple, for example, do you get the alerts from all of the different calendars or just one? It gets a bit more complicated. And the bigger downside to me is just that no one seems to be doing this even with their own proprietary models. So A, it's going to be harder for existing clients to adopt JMAP calendars if this is something in there. And secondly, actually, is there any demand for this? Or is it just more complicated? And it seems adding complexity when there's no demand is, and the biggest con as well, potentially, is doesn't actually map that easily to CalDAV because CalDAV doesn't support this, and explicitly you cannot have the same scheduled UID in different calendars in the same account in CalDAV. But Ron, you're, I think, more proponent of this.
Yeah, you can have a non-scheduled UID in multiple calendars in CalDAV,
Yes,
but one of the bigger issues is that this does kind of map to CalDAV, or the related issue with CalDAV, that if you move something in a client, the client then has to calculate a move command on the server rather than being able to upload the new one and then delete the old one, or you've got a race condition where you have to delete the old one. There's a bunch of different ways in which you could wind up with the data in two different calendars. So I think it's cleaner and clearer, and the server can always just reject an attempt to set multiple calendars if it doesn't support it.
I didn't quite follow that, but I think I got that you are still in favor of having support for multiple calendars for an event, but I wasn't quite sure why. I mean, JMAP, to move it between calendars, is just an update to the calendar ID property, so it's very simple, and it's a single command. There's no create and then destroy.
Yeah, but a CalDAV client talking to it similarly, particularly because something could wind up with the same ID. I think you could reject an attempt to set something with the same ID that has different content in a different calendar with this already exists, but if it has exactly the same content, it should just become a second calendar ID, because that way it's easier to recover from data being restored into another calendar that's in the same namespace and a bunch of conditions like that.
How would you map that to CalDAV, though? Like, if it's a scheduled event, you're not allowed to do that in CalDAV.
Yeah, if assuming the server actually enforces that restriction,
Right.
you would then enforce the same restriction if it was a scheduled event. But we've run into issues with our implementation and clients that don't like the idea of an event not being able to exist in multiple calendars on the CalDAV level.
We'll keep Braun there, but also recognize Ken. How about that?
Yeah, Ken Richardson. So, Ron, when you say our clients, are you talking about our UI or actual CalDAV clients having a problem not allowing?
CalDAV clients having issues talking to our CalDAV server that it rejected the same event being created in multiple calendars because they would try and upload it to another calendar before deleting it from the old one rather than doing a copy or fun things like that, or doing a move. I mean, the fact that the copy command exists in CalDAV, you can't use it within one account.
Yes, and our server disallows it for the reason Neil mentioned earlier, that with scheduled events, they can only be on one calendar.
Yeah, we tweaked that to make all events so that it would be JMAP compatible.
I believe other vendors do the same thing. They only allow one UID per user's set of calendars. Now, if you got something shared or whatnot, that might change things slightly, but I'm not sure what the use case is, and maybe I'm just being dense.
It creates a discontinuity between, because you can have the same event on a calendar that's shared into your space for another user, but you can't have the same event on two calendars within your own user.
Right. The use case is, this is Barry. The use case is I share a calendar with you and I share a different calendar with Ron, and I want you both to see the same event. So I put it in both calendars so it's in, and of course that's a contrived use case, but if you make it a little more complicated, it's a real use case.
It's somewhat contrived, but yes, it is based in reality, so I can kind of see that being an issue.
Maybe we'll take this one to the list then and see if there's some wider feedback,
go to
given that
list.
I think there'll be some people not currently in the room that have opinions. Or was that someone else wanted to speak?
Yeah, there's Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just trying to remember the history of this. As I recollect, the only reason for the restriction was that at the time, Cyrus and Wilfred didn't want to have to limit your scheduling to a specific calendar. They want to do a search for the UID across all your calendars to find it. But it does, as Bron says, it is inconsistent that all over the place you can have multiple events with the same UID, yet we have this one restriction.
Yeah, I mean, JMAP, I think already is going to have a restriction of a UID can only exist once anywhere in the account. So that kind of avoids. So you could
but how are you going to deal with the sharing issue where it's going to turn up again in a different way?
Well, because shared is a different account.
But the client-wise, it's the same deal. It looks the same in the end.
Yeah, the client may want to merge those in its display. It's true if it's the same data in a shared.
The issue is what ended up happening was that we ended up with all the same problems because of sharing, and it's, instead of solving those issues up front, so that you could allow for the possibility of the same event turning up in two different places, it was pushed out of the way and said, "Oh, it won't happen," and then sharing came along and it did happen. So. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why it might happen. You might, as I think Bron mentioned one, what if you import a whole batch of events? So we're going to filter every one of them to make sure that the same UID doesn't turn up.
This is Daniel Kahn-Gilmore at the mic here. I just want to second what Mike is saying. I regularly run into this problem, not via JMAP, but just with the calendar files in a calendar client, where I import an event and then I move it to a different calendar. And then I get an update about that event with the same UID, and I import it, and then it's got to deal with the fact that you've got two things with the same UID, but they're in different calendars, and then I try to merge them, and they're different because it was an update. These things happen in the real world.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think the problem all arose because because Cyrus and Wilfredo wanted to simplify the world right down to something really easy to deal with, but unfortunately, the world was more complicated than that.
Okay, I think we'll take this one to the list afterwards then and write up a bit more. And because I think there's, definitely some people not in the room or on right now that will have some opinions. So consider this one unresolved and move on. Is that? Sounds
Yeah,
good?
I think there's enough discussion that it'd be good to have it on the list.
Yeah. Okay, let's carry on.
Okay. Keep moving.
Yeah.
Alert push.
Okay, so this is, so at the moment you mainly just get push events for state changes on the server, but obviously calendar events can have alerts and clients can calculate when those fire themselves. But again, for things like webhooks or various other integrations or just less sophisticated clients, might want the server to be able to calculate when should this alert fire and just push an event to say, hey, this alert's just gone off. So firstly, so if it did that, it's not a state change event. We'll have to define a different type of push event. That's okay. It's already got a type on it, so we can extend that to push different types down. Is this something that we think should be added to the spec, the ability for the server to push when alerts fires to clients? And if so, is this something that's just a mandatory part of the spec, or is it a separate capability? I think are my two main questions. And then there's some kind of syntax, so question over how we set it up, but that's not actually that important. We can work that out. So main question is, yes, do we think that's a capability that we need in servers, and is it a mandatory capability or optional one? Anyone got
Any opinions from the floor? Or the virtual floor? Guess not. Oh. You're just a little slow. Okay.
I like how Ron appears on the screen and then puts himself.
So, sorry, my button was, yes, I can just turn myself on, but I thought I'd be polite. I think this is the kind of thing that it's actually perfectly fine to be in a separate capability, because it requires the server to keep track of alarms.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of work for the server to do this, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing to put that kind of thing in a separate capability. We built a nice, powerful capability system, and as all the discussion about extension mechanisms rusting shut says, I don't think we've got any risk of our extension mechanism rusting shut, but it's perfectly fine for this to be a separate capability, and then it's not mandatory, and everyone's happy.
Well, Ken?
Everyone.
Yeah. Ken Richardson, it is a lot of work for the server. I guess my question will be, will the clients even use it? Or are they just going to do the alerts on their own anyways? It's kind of like the whole time zone thing. We push time zones to clients to throw it away immediately and do their own thing. Would this be in the same realm? I don't have the answer. I'm just asking the question.
That's a good question. I don't know. I see in the generic case having probably more people interested in using it for, I said, kind of like webhooks. So if you create a push subscription on the server, then it does a callback rather than pushing that directly to a client. It does some other action, and so you could use this system to, like, if this then that kind of thing, trigger when an event alert fires. It does some other arbitrary thing off somewhere else potentially. But yeah, it's a bit hazy as a use case. I give you.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
I was just saying, this sounds like my argument against doing too much with alarms and things, because the actual thing that's raising the alert probably needs to know much more about where you are, what you're doing, and all the rest of it than the server's going to know. It just doesn't seem a very useful.
Well, the thing that receives it wouldn't have to actually do anything or show the user anything.
No, but if it's not going to do anything, I mean, for example, if you're 20 minutes away from an event and you've got an alert set for 5 minutes ahead of the event, that alert is absolutely no use to you. You want the alert 20 minutes in advance, and so you better get moving to get to the event. So it just seems not an enormously useful.
Yes, I think
at least for regular alerts for users. I mean, I can see maybe in process control or something like that kind of thing, which is not too far fetched. But
so maybe we don't want this in the spec at all. Then I don't know if it seems we're struggling with use cases.
I'd be inclined to put it off. because I think it's probably going to end up not being used much.
Okay.
Ken?
This is kind of gonna, yeah, I say we leave it out of the core JMAP calendar spec, and if somebody comes up with a valid use case or a strong need, we just add as an extension.
Yeah, I mean, given it clearly would be a separate capability anyway, it almost doesn't matter if it's in its own document or a separate document. It's much for muchness.
And the other way of looking at it, of course, is even if you're doing it server side, it's essentially having a client on the server, just handling alerts.
Okay, I guess I'll leave that out for now then, which makes life easier. And if someone really wants it, we'll create a separate document for it. Okay, IETF messages. So we need to be able to send IETF messages for scheduling when you do certain things, like you create an event that has invitees. This is how interoperable scheduling works. So I think the main question is whether these are just sent implicitly because you create an event with them, or explicitly. I think JMAP style definitely tends to be a bit more explicit, but if it's explicit, how explicit? Is it just an argument to a calendar event set to say, send IETF, and any change you make that should send an IETF thing, the server works out the appropriate thing to send and sends it? Or is it actually more explicit than that, where the client says, do this, do that in some more precise way? If that makes sense. Oh, that's Mike again.
It's me again. My whole problem with the IETF thing about when and how you send messages is that it says, it has sort of wording like send a message when something important changes. Well, who makes that decision? If you change the location, even if it's to another room in a building, that may be extremely important to one of the attendees. It's not up to the to the organizer, whatever, to decide what's important. And so my feeling has always been that any change ought to be transmitted to the clients. The question is, does the client bother telling the user that something's changed? And that's much easier to determine at the client end than at the server side or the originating side.
Yes, except for IMIP messages often will end up in the user's mailbox, which is why often this restricts it a bit.
Well, isn't that just a sort of an implementation issue?
It is a bit. I think the main question here, though, is probably exactly what messages to send. We can't define exactly because it's going to depend a bit on what the server wants to do or what it thinks the client wants to do. So perhaps we document those as a best common practice separate document rather than...
I would certainly agree with that. I mean, one of the problems with IETF has been that it didn't make it absolutely clear. I mean, it sort of said you don't have to send this, you don't have to send that. So everybody started sending everything. And in reality, you could send much more compact messages than people are sending. And we should probably encourage that.
Ken, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I'll echo what Mike said, but I also would say let's not make the same mistake we made with CalDev with implicit scheduling, and you have a situation where you're just trying to move stuff onto a calendar from an external source, and we start firing off a bunch of events. I think this should always, the client should always tell us, yes, do my scheduling requests, or no. Let's get that in there from day one.
Absolutely.
The client always has control.
I think just the question really is more about, is it just a simple yes, no, send scheduling stuff for these changes? Or is it more you send the changes and you send a separate method call to say, now send these IETF messages?
I don't see why it couldn't be just in the calendar event set.
Just say yes, no, send scheduling messages. That's probably the simplest option. We'll start with that then, and then see if we come up with use cases that's not covered by that.
Having some implementation experience to figure out if we're making something.
That's kind of where we're getting to with CalDAV at the moment, with the extra stuff that's in CalX right now. Basically gives you that on-off capability. So it would match that. Okay.
Well, one obnoxious thing that showed up for FastMail users just recently with this was that if you're missing the correct ACLs on the calendar scheduling out box, then the CalDAV set works, the put works, but it just sets a schedule status 3.8, which means permission denied, which at the moment is not even mapped through to JMAP. So the user can't see that their scheduling message wasn't sent. It just silently didn't happen for them.
Yeah, that's nasty. We can give proper error messages with JMAP. If you try, say I want to send IMIP or whatever, ITIP, and we can't, we can just reject the whole change and say, sorry, we can't because this.
Yeah, the difficult part there is the whole, when a server rejects anything that's not entirely correct, then the client could lose significant changes. If someone's done a lot of editing on the event, do they want it to fail to save?
I mean, that's to a certain extent up to a client to handle, though. The client knows what it sent. It can not just throw it away if the server gives a message error that's just this is the message, the data was fine, but I couldn't send ITIP because of reason. The client can then prompt the users, well, do you want to save this anyway without sending the messages, or what?
The difficult case always is you walk away or you close your client after hitting save. There's nowhere else. You have to correct the issue before you can save your data, or you have to copy paste it out into a separate document. It's not a good user experience to not be able to save their intermediate state somehow.
Somehow is, a bit vague though. I don't see any obvious way of doing that, but if you have a suggestion, I guess
not at 3 a.m. But
okay.
I'll keep thinking about it.
Okay, Ken was next.
So the issue Bron's describing has to do with scheduling on shared calendars, which we all know is a mess. And I think it's incumbent upon us to kind of straighten that out as part of this.
I think that will be much clearer in this.
And
yes.
If we can get it right with JMAP calendars, perhaps we can filter some of that back down to CalDAV for legacy systems.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was just going to say that Bron raised the old issue of draft events, really. Which was shouted down years ago, but keeps popping up again. So, I mean, that would sort of solve it if you're implicitly creating a draft event as you're working. It will not disappear. It'll just be still draft.
That's fairly straightforward for creating. If you're updating an existing one, I think it gets a bit trickier because you still need the one that's the current status plus possibly a draft change to it. That's a bit.
Well, I guess you can copy it into a draft.
Yeah, but it's.
And then copy it back again.
Okay, well, we should maybe have a look at this on the list of whether there's something we can do with drafts. And actually, that reminds me, I completely forgot about until now. Maybe we want to do something about having a trash place to put calendar events.
Oh, I tried trash. It was terrible.
No? Okay. Well, okay.
But I implemented it. It caused me so many problems. But maybe go on.
Maybe. Okay.
I have got something to say about the next slide if you want.
All right. Let's move on.
I'll just leave you there then, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. This is just about adding support for the capabilities of VAVAILABILITY, which is our C7953. I think this is definitely a separate capability, and I'm inclined to punt it to an extension. But
all I want to say about that is the work I do with Oasis, which is when I built, we did the soap stuff. Like Oasis is all soapy, and I finished that, and they said that's all great, because we do soap, but what we really want to do is something that's JSON, and that was a long time ago, and I think they would be very interested in this whole JMAP thing, but they really love the availability.
So there's going to be a method I'm currently calling calendar user /get availability, which looks at your free busy time. It's your free busy report essentially. But I'm going to make sure that the way that responds would also work once you have support for availability, or even if you already have it, just you can't set it via JMAP. I think, and then we can add this on extra. I think we're definitely going to want to add it. It's just whether we try.
Well, there's another twist to it as well, is that it is already implemented, but in a very simple form. Apple, I think, uses it for their office hours.
Yes, we were experimenting with that. As far as we can tell, it's the only thing you can set there.
Yeah, it creates a availability object, I think, but it's very simple.
So I'm curious. Are we thinking about leaving it out of the base spec because we think nobody's going to use it, or because we think it's too difficult, or some other reason?
Because I think it's quite a bit of extra complexity to add into the spec, and so, yeah, just more work.
Are we thinking about doing the equivalent of? I mean, if we assume that we can store, and what I'm saying is my mind's gone blank. The entity types being, calendars just for events, calendars just for tasks, calendars just for availability. Are we going to specify that from the outset? Which I think we should. And then it becomes relatively easy because you say, this collection just holds availability.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of implicitly the case at the moment because there's only events in the system. So a calendar can only contain events. As soon as we add other types, yes, we would want to say whether you're allowed multiple in one calendar or whether availability has to be in a separate one. You recommend availability should be completely in a separate calendar too?
Well, I that's the way we've gone with CalDAV, except that it keeps causing problems. And the reason they did that in CalDAV is because there was the danger of people simply deleting a calendar because they thought it contained only events when it contained events and tasks. And that was the reason they moved away from mixed entity types in collections.
Yeah, I think tasks and events, that was a terrible idea that those were mixed together into calendars. I don't think we would do the same with JMAP, but as I said at the beginning, there's no tasks in this at the moment. We're just looking at events. Availability is a bit less clear in my mind whether that should always be in a separate calendar or should be combined with a single one.
Well, I think that you run into the same problem if it's a real thing, in that people who do queries on a collection that are filtered to a certain type think that's all there is in there. And then they simply delete it, thinking they're not, and so they throw away a whole load of other stuff.
Well, the other option in JMAP is that the availability things wouldn't have to be tied to a calendar at all. They belong just to the calendar user overall, so they just exist in the account. The only reason they'd need to be tied to a calendar is if you wanted to manage permissions separately for different people on the availability, which you probably would.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah.
It's actually, yes. And the real power of availability comes when you present different availabilities to different people.
Okay.
So I would argue for, from the outset, indicating what type of thing is inside a calendar collection and making that part of this basic spec. So we start off in that state.
Okay, that's easy to add. Yep.
This is kind of, again, I have no strong opinion on single entities and calendars, but I'm fine either way. As far as availability goes, personally, I would lean towards putting it in the base spec because as Mike's been keen to saying in the past, and Bron's current calendar notwithstanding, just because free busy isn't as useful as availability is. Just because my calendar says I'm free at 3 a.m. doesn't necessarily mean I'm available for a meeting. And I think availability captures that.
Yes.
When can you schedule with me?
Okay.
A lot better.
I will look again at keeping it in the base spec under. Certainly, at least part of it needs to be under a separate capability, I think. But
well, I can certainly provide some help with that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Mike. Okay, I think that's
it.
All the time I've got.
And several issues here. It sounded like you had a good sense of the room on several of them, but if you could take them all to the list, and we want to confirm the consensus there.
Sure, I think we'll do that. Okay, cool. I better let next go.
Thanks.
There's one other issue that's come up with this that wasn't on those slides that I wanted to just mention to the room, and that is the idea of per user data and what belongs to a user and what is shared between users. In IMAP, we share the scene. We have per user scene state and shared everything else in our server, and there's no way to tell. Well, there is because there's an annotation that you can query. But in general, there's no way to tell which parameters are shared where and which ones are individual to a user.
Yes, quite a few properties will need to be per user. I guess the main question is, do we just document which ones those are in the spec, or does the server get to decide in a certain manner, in which case it would have to advertise which ones are per user? I was inclined to just document which ones should be per user in the spec, but maybe there's other opinions on that.
Okay, thanks, Neil. And just a reminder, several people have come in. Blue sheets are right behind Barry there. Please make sure that you've signed the blue sheets. And Alexi is up.
Right. So obviously, if anything happens to this document, it probably will have to be AD sponsored by Barry. Yes. Right. So I was lucky enough this week that I have some sleepless hours, and I had a chance to think a little bit more about. So basically, at the moment, the document only contains the basic SMIME signature verification. There is one extra thing that might be added, which I will talk about on the slides, and advanced feature if there is a desire to have cooperating server and store your private key in the server. You can do encryption, decryption, and signing. Top. But that's probably separate capability. Yes. Right. So in order to report the status, SMIME status response property can be requested, and it's a string with some simple structure.
Next slide.
Yes. So unknown is when the server cannot figure out, it might be multi-part sign message, for example, but of a format that the server doesn't know. So for example, it can be like OpenPGP, but where this is SMIME. Signed is a status that server knows it's SMIME signed, but didn't try to verification yet. And then once verification is done, it's either SMIME verified or signed verified or signed failed. Neil raised a good question this week about when does the server return just signed and when does the server return signed verified, signed failed. So this is very loosely based on my implementation, and there, if you just want a list of messages, you just return signed. If you want to actually view a specific message, then you will verify it. The reason for this is verification operation might be quite expensive, so you want to delay this.
Daniel.
This is Daniel Kahn-Gilmore. I recommend cutting down the number of statuses here. I recommend 2 statuses only, and not 4. The statuses are signed and verified and nothing. Those are the 2 statuses. It's not clear to me as a user what I gain from learning signed failed compared to unknown. We found that we had the same situation true in DKIM, where a DKIM signature that doesn't validate should not be treated any differently than no DKIM signature whatsoever. I know many people do, but it's a mistake. And as a user of an email client, it is not clear to me that a big red warning sign, just because there happens to be something that looked like an SMIME signature, makes any sense whatsoever, because it doesn't defend me against an adversary who's trying to forge things. They just strip the signature and remove the big red warning. So, so I think for cognitive load for the users, the only 2 states you want are this has been verified, and verified needs to cover quite a bit of ground more than what you've described here. I think verified needs to cover that the timestamp of the signature matches to some level the date stamp in the message, that the sender was the same as the certificate, that the certificate itself has been validated, and so forth.
Yes, yes. Most of this is implied. Slight difficulty is
the efficiency thing where you defer the verification, yeah?
No, the other part is that in my implementation, if the sender certificate expires, it moved to signed failed.
Right. So,
but I mean, we can return this information in some other way if it matters.
I would love to see a draft that explains how to check signatures in the context of store and forward data with expiring certificates, because I don't think anyone's ever actually written that down. I have some strong opinions about what the right thing to do is. in that you want to evaluate the signature at the time that the things claim to be, right? And you want it to fail if the timestamp of the message itself differs from the timestamp of the signature. So you're evaluating stuff at the time the message claims to have been, and you are required then to be showing that date stamp and the context of the message in the date stamp appropriately, which may mean for a mail that you also want to check to make sure that if it's in reply to some other messages, that its timestamp is actually after the messages that it replied to, for some definition of after. No, I'm just saying that what you want is you want the mail user agent to think very clearly about what this signal actually means. And just because I sent a message with a key that later expired, and certificate, it's signed, that it's later expired, doesn't mean that it should show up as nothing once the certificate expires. That doesn't make sense.
Well, yes, it wouldn't show as nothing and before you asked to go from 4 statuses to 2. But yeah, I understand. Yeah, I understand. Sounds like you have some ideas, so maybe we can think of some text and we can see if we agree.
Well, firstly, just on DKG's point, the quick, you say the date of the message, but there are many dates involved inside a message, and many of those can be forged. So you need to be more specific about which date. So probably the one it was received by your server. No, because the date header field, you can write whatever you want into there. No one can.
But what DKG is saying is, if it's a signed message, maybe you don't want people to be able to put any date they want. It needs to connect to when it was signed in a reasonable way. So if I put...
Yes, but you can claim to have signed it a week ago, because a week ago is the date, because the certificate's expired, you might...
There are ways to fudge this, but what I wanted to respond to Daniel about was I don't want to start getting into all sorts of tying things together and message threads and validating relative to the reply to or to the in reply to and that kind of stuff. That's just getting way out of the scope of a signature.
Mm-hmm.
The signature is not saying that this is in reply to that other message and therefore it has to be later than the other message is a semantic content of the message. And that's not what the signature is for. Right? Okay.
All right, let's take a second here from Bron.
Yeah, what I wanted to comment on was debuggability. One of the things that really frustrates me about DNSSEC is that you just get back an NX domain when you request something, and what's actually happening is a key signing failure, but the domain totally exists, or the record totally exists. I think it's great to have something that just tells you, yes, signed, verified, or not known, but there needs to be a property that can be fetched for anyone developing or testing, or for a support department to ask the user, can you tell me what this shows? So it actually might need to be visible through the user as well, so that they can report to support, here's why my message has an issue, rather than being completely undebuggable.
Actually, I thought you got a serve fail, but same concept.
It's easy to get caught up with the attacker case and make the regular case very hard to use.
Although, without the attack case, the regular case doesn't really matter. But anyway,
Yes.
This is Neil Jenkins. I just wanted to make a quick point before we go back to all that other stuff, just about from a JMAP point of view. If this does have a signed state that I've not verified it yet, but I want to, I think the way to do that would be to say, if you request one of these properties, body structure, HTML body, basically any of the body properties,
Right.
then you can expect, if you fetch at the same time the signed state, it will be verified or failed or whatever.
Right, and after that it will be cached basically.
Sure, you don't need to actually bother about that. Whereas if you fetch it without fetching one of those properties at the same time, you may only get back a signed state if we keep those values.
Okay.
DKG here. So Bron, I completely agree with you that there may be a good cause to have debugging data. And I don't think this is the place to do that. Maybe there's some additional thing that you can ask for debugging information about how the signature verification failed. But given the number of ways that I think signature verifications can fail, I think it's a mistake to try to put that in this status value, which looks very much like something we are encouraging the user agent to display directly to the user.
Okay. Yeah, if we are going to return information about a failure, it's probably going to be a separate property anyway.
That's-
Yes,
that-
I agree
And
absolutely.
it may even be a free-form textual field that says, you know,
Yes.
right, right. Yeah, I don't know. Bron, did you want to go ahead?
Well, I think gentleman behind you in line was next.
Hey, Seth Gentle. I just want to say that to reiterate what Bron was saying, I'm imagining the ideal UI to be something like what browsers do today, which is, if there's like there's an error here, I can see exactly why the certificate failure, why the signature failure checked, right? Like that's what I would. Well, I mean, a lot of developers use that, Like I know that my mom doesn't click on that button, but I certainly do when I'm building a website.
Right.
And yeah.
Sorry, I just want to do my usual pushback against using my mom as a non-technical user. We are a gendered space. We're heavily male. There's a bunch of age assumptions there. I know it's not an intentional thing. My mom happens to be a technical user. Let's not make those assumptions about people who might be in the room or might not be in the room. So yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of funny to use the browser model as the model that we're working from. Because when the browser model fails, you don't see the site at all, right? And that's not at all the case here.
I'm not saying it's ideal.
Right.
I'm saying UI is
Well, as someone who's debugged a lot of certificate errors, I'm not actually convinced that it's also thought through. It doesn't show you then there are multiple failures, for example. If you have an expired certificate that also doesn't match, it'll usually tell you one of those two problems, but not the other. So.
Okay, I think Bron's next.
All right, if I can remember what my other point was here. In terms of the JMAPiness of it, as a server implementer, I prefer if you requested this property, we calculate it for you. If you don't request it, we don't. I can see why you might want to, when fetching a listing, I guess, have it pre-calculated without having to fetch the body structure on it. But the question then becomes, do you bump the state when you calculate it? Because if you don't bump the state when you calculate it, then how do you know it's changed?
Yeah, you can define that kind of exceptions, but the general JMAP semantics don't quite match to it gets calculated if you fetch specific other properties. That is a bit weird, I believe.
I mean, I know if I implemented it in Cyrus IMAP, then what would happen is at the time it got calculated, it would either set a keyword or it would set an annotation, and either way that would bump the mod sequence. So it would actually report that message as having changed.
Neil Jenkins, just on the browser thing, actually the lesson learned there is moving away from showing this is trusted to not showing anything if it passes and showing big red warning signs to, don't even go here if it fails. That's the only state, because users do not notice like this is fine. They don't notice the absence of a this is fine notice. That's the key thing. But I know you have use cases perhaps that are different. I don't know.
So sorry, this is DKG. Just one more thing that I wanted to add. I think Bron is right to think about what it means to do the verification and how that changes the state of the message. And I want to flag that perhaps what you want in the state is the timestamp that for if it comes back signed as opposed to not signed, which are the two states I'm recommending. What you may want to have also is signed and verified and a timestamp when it was verified. Now, I am not a big fan of moving the cryptographic utility into the server. So the fact that this is situated in the server makes me uneasy. But if you're going to be doing the cryptographic verification in the server, the thing that I want from my cryptographic verifier is actually a cached timestamp that says, I saw this thing and I verified it at time T. It's very different for me to get a message. I look at a message on my laptop and I'm looking at it in 2019 and it's from a message that was in 2002 and it says signature verified. Then what I have that is actually a timestamp from my trusted user agent that says, I actually did verify this in 2002. That's semantically different. And so I think you might want it to say signed and verified with a timestamp.
Yeah, you have to verify it in 2002, because if you verify it in 2019 using the key that was valid in 2002, that key has existed for 17 years, and if it's been cracked or leaked in that time, then that message could be faked.
That still might be relevant, right? I might have just imported an archive of messages and I
Right.
want to use that, right? So,
Yeah.
so there may be a circumstance where the user agent will decide what to display based on the timestamp of the verification compared to the timestamp of the message. But that is one thing that I think should be bundled with a signature verification is a timestamp check about it. And I don't know exactly what that means, and I don't know how we make the user agent use it, but I'm happy to work with folks to think about what the semantics are there.
Okay, and you mean timestamp of when it was initially verified, when it was the first time it was verified?
The earliest verification. I don't think you gain anything by storing additional attempts at
I
verification.
don't think you do either.
No. You need a chain of custody, and you need to verify it with a key that's valid every time that the previous valid key expires, really.
Okay.
Okay,
There are some weird developers cases when you didn't install Trust Anchor when you were testing, and it failed, and then you install it, and then later it succeeded. But anyway, yeah, I'm not.
I'd like
But that's. I'm not suggesting that you store a timestamp for when the signature verification fails.
Agreed.
I'm only suggesting that you store it for when it succeeds.
Fine.
I'd
Sounds good.
like to move the discussion along because we're taking a lot longer than budgeted here.
Right. So, if we want to do signing, encryption, decryption, then there is identity object, which extended with SMIME credentials. At the moment, is key ID, which is like a blob ID and various other IDs, and certificate you can retrieve. Private key is not retrievable through this interface. If somebody really wants this, we can discuss, but that's probably safer default. And also, additionally, you can mark the private key, whether it's only for signing, for encryption, or for both. You can also mark a special case if it's expired, but you still want to be able to decrypt all mail. You can mark both of them as false. Then it might be able to decrypt it, but it's not usable for sending stuff out. Next slide. So yeah, I was trying to figure out how to exactly create or construct a message which is decrypted, or with if it's opacally signed, how to extract the payload. So I think with some help from Neil, he suggested I add an attribute to email parse to. Well, basically, SMIME decode default is false, so nothing is done. If it's true, then the blob is first attempted to be decrypted and or stripped from signature, unpacked from CMS, basically. And then it will be parsed. And then at the end of this, there will be a new message with new blob, new message which you can act on. Next slide. And on the sending side, email submission object needs to be extended with, at the moment, I made these two objects. Maybe it's sufficient to make them just Booleans, but if we need any more information. Oh yeah, actually, so yeah, in this case, you can actually say, you can possibly have multiple keys and you want to specify which one you want to use. Although if you specify identity, it might not be needed. So we need to think a bit about this.
Neil Jenkins. Yeah, this seems broadly fine given the model, which is the server is basically doing the encryption kind of on the edge, going out, right? So
yeah.
So just to be clear, if you do this, it's just the version that's sent that is SMIME encrypted and or signed. The version you store locally in your sent copy is not, because this is just prior to the actual submission. Yeah, that's what you're intending?
You probably will store the encrypted message in your sent folder, but
right.
It basically allows you to do transformations before you send.
Sure, you probably doesn't want to be part of email submission then, I would have said, because that implies to me something that just happens to the submitted message that's sent out, not your copy. I think you probably want to do it as part of the email/set potentially then, to say create this, and also when you create it, encrypt it and or sign it. That's the 5322 message I want created.
Also, move it to a different object where the message is created,
Yes,
as opposed
if you
to
want it in your
submission.
copy as well, I think
Yes,
belongs
that's
in
a good point. All right.
email/set, not in email submission, which is about the copy you're sending out.
Yes, good point.
Daniel Kahn Gilmore. I'm really sad about this work. The idea of moving the secret key material that is the user's cryptographic identity and capability for seeing end-to-end data into the server. I think it causes problems for other people in the ecosystem who are trying to understand what end-to-end encrypted email actually means. The fact that you've moved it there. I understand that anyone can leak clear text, any clear text that they have access to, but I just want to point out that I think this work is radically different than the signature verification work, and I think it belongs in an entirely separate document, and I don't think it would be right to try to conflate the two, because I'm uncomfortable vaguely with the signature verification work because you're relying on this other party to do the checks for you. In this case, you're actually relying on the other party not to compromise the security, the confidentiality of the messages, and not to forge messages as you, which otherwise they wouldn't be capable of doing. So I strongly recommend, if you're going to work on this, that you work on it in some separate draft, not in the same draft.
Yeah, points taken.
Neil Jenkins. I mean, I actually think there is a use case here, which is generally you have a kind of generally a corporate like company, which is a trusted boundary, if you like, on the outside, and the stuff, and it's other boundary things are encrypted or decrypted for transit. It's not about end-to-end encryption. That is a different use case, but I think that's where this is kind of, where SMIME in general is kind of more useful.
I hear you say it's not about end-to-end encryption, but when the user who's outside of that system is sending mail to them, do they think it's about end-to-end encryption? Yeah, I don't either. And that causes, that paints a very confusing picture for people who are trying to use email, who are not the operators of this system, who are trying to understand what it means when they send mail.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say with that, it is not necessarily always the case that the client and the server are operated by two different parties. Your server might be your home box that is sitting underneath your TV and it is fully controlled and owned by you, that your client is talking to securely and that is then holding your keys. The Apple model where the server, where everything's pushed to Apple devices to the point that I can't get a one-time password without owning an Apple device in order to talk to their server. Even in that case, the server might be the more powerful device that your watch is talking to, that's sitting in your pocket.
I understand that, Bron, and I mean, certainly there are use cases where it would have the same fundamental confidentiality and integrity properties and authenticity properties as it would if it was on the local device that you hold. But when we define this, we have to be aware of the context that we're defining it in. And the context that we're defining it in is that many people will be using this with servers that they don't have the same level of reliability on.
Yeah, I agree with you that a separate document's a good idea.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah, I think that's it.
All right. Thank you, Alexi. And so next we have Raphael.
Yes, hello. So about the MDN part, I pushed a version 0.2 at the beginning of the week. The idea is that it makes it simpler using more concepts from JMAP core. So next slide, please. So the main change is the following. It's defining a simple MDN object with a very basic set method using only create and a parse method. So we replace the previous version who was extended message submission object. Next slide, please. So now the MDN set response is similar to standard set method. So as again, it's simpler. Thank you, Neil's comment. The only caveat is that it's returning no more a message submission, but just the partial response from the MDN. So in this case, we are sending an email because the NDN is somewhat an email without having a message submission to follow it. But given that it's often a send and forget message, I think it's okay. Next, please. And the other change has several little fixes, updating JMAP core, congratulations, and remove the registration of an already registered keyword and some typos. And next slide, and that's it. Any question?
This is Neil. No questions really. I think the general model is much better now. It's much more JMAP, for want of a better word. Yeah, I need to actually read through the latest version again properly, but this seems pretty reasonable.
Thank you.
It's Bron. I have one comment on it. I wonder whether MDN is clear enough as a name, whether we want a longer name for the object, just that this is a global namespace for all things that will be JMAP later.
Neil, again, yeah, actually, that's a good point. I think, probably, I mean, obviously, you'll need to actually use the capability for it to appear, so the namespacing problem isn't as big as you would have thought, but yeah, it might be a good idea to actually expand that out a bit.
This is Barry. I don't want to belabor this or, make a bike shed out of it. But MDN is certainly a well enough known term that I wouldn't worry about it, but I don't feel strongly either way.
Okay.
I don't either. It just jumped up a bit.
All right. Looks like the queue is empty now. So thank you, Raphael. Is there any other business? People are shaking their heads. Please sign the blue sheets if you haven't already. And thank you for coming to this session.
And thank you to the remote participants and particularly to the remote chair who is up at some crazy ass hour.
Yeah, indeed.
It's
Get
all
some
good.
on.
just about to. Thanks for running it, Jim. And see you next one.
All right. See you then.
What do you currently? I don't know.